I hope so, sir. I will definitely try.
Good morning. Today is Tuesday, June 13th, 2017. This is the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Johnson, Soboroff, Figueroa Villa, McLean Hill, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum. Number one on the agenda, consent agenda.
Do we have any comments on any of the consent agenda items?
We have no comment cards, sir.
Do I have do any of my fellow commissioners want an item pulled, or do I have a motion to approve items 1A, B, C, and D?
I'd approve with thanks to the donors.
Okay,
Approve with thanks to the donors.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
We're now on item number 2, regular agenda items. We have comment cards on C and D.
C and D, okay. With respect to items 2B, E, F, and G, would anybody like a report on those items? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve items 2B, E, F, and G?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, let's go to item 2A, please.
2A, Department's verbal presentation and discussion relative to the status of the work being done by the LGBTQ Task Force.
Good morning.
Good morning, President Johnson. Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Beck, Mr. Bustamante, Mr. Tefang. Thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on what the LAPD is doing in close partnership and conjunction with what we call the LGBTQ Working Group. And that's about 30 folks that come to us from a very diverse cross-section of the city, representing very different points of view, but collaborative in spirit, to work forward, taking talk and discussion to another level, which is some tangible items and deliverables I'd like to share with you today. But I'd also like to introduce my partners in this wonderful, wonderful, privileged venture. We have Captain Al Neal from Community Relationship Division, Detective Ian Lewis, and Jules Sohn as well. Also, I just want to preface this by saying many of these projects were also done in conjunction with the leadership of Captain Ruby Malachi, who has since moved on to commanding officer of Hollenbeck area, but she definitely deserves recognition in these. What I'd like to do, first of all, is kind of share with you the list of collaborators that the working group includes and works with on a regular basis. And I apologize in advance if this list appears partial, but it is not at all an intended omission. The LGBT Center, the City and County HRC, the Los Angeles City Fire Department, APAIT, the City Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Department, FBI, Trans-Latina Coalition, St. John's, San Fernando LGBT Center, the Neighborhood Councils, CDs 13, 4, and 10, the Los Angeles World Airports Police, LA Unified School District, ACLU, My Friend's Place, and also many members of the faith-based community. What I'd like to do is discuss some of the continuing recurrent projects and then kind of emphasize some of the things that we've actually delivered on in the last period since we've reported to the Commission. Post-training continues with the LGBTQ cultural competency training in which Jules Sohn and Ian have participated in the past, which is part of the FTO Field Training Officer School that is given at the Academy. Very important because we're talking to officers who are tenured, who have been out in the field for some time, but have the duty and responsibility to train our most impressionable and newest officers, the probationers. So I think what makes this training so unique is it's a joint effort between the LAPD and community members, and Drian Juarez from the LGBT Center often participates in those, and I believe Commissioner Goldsmith, you were at one of those training sessions. But I think the relevancy there is to not only talk about some of the important pieces with regard to language and interaction, but to bring that empathetic piece there for officers to see how their interchange affects community members in very deep and very tangible ways. So we're very proud of that ongoing training. The LGBTQ working group also helped to formulate the last Chief of Police Forum agenda. We went to them, and they were very interested in bringing issues of immigration and homelessness in panel discussions to that meeting, and I think there was some fruitful conversation and follow-ups there as well. The other thing that I think is very important to emphasize on a department-wide basis is the responsiveness of the working group, Jules and Ian as well, to issues that may arise within the geographic areas. So if there is a contact of concern by a community member with an officer, we will arrange those meetings, see if we can work things out, or if we have to take things to the next level. But I think it's very important to emphasize that all of the Office of Operations is linked in with this liaison position that I hold with CRD, and with the fact that department-wide they feel a responsibility to ensure that the agenda of the working group transforms into all 21 geographic areas. The working group also will help participate in the upcoming commission mixer, and we're proud to say that that will be taking place tomorrow. But some of the completed initiatives I'd like to share with you right now, I think we want to highlight. In addition to the Chiefs Forum, which we just completed, Jules Sohn and I participate in the Mayor's Transgender Advisory Council. I think that's very important, and we'll talk about it a little later in this conversation with regard to the concerns of the transgender community, with regard especially to transgender women of color. And the TAC, as it's known, headed by Karina Samala, is a board that really wants to move many initiatives forward, especially with regard to unemployment and homelessness within the transgender community. So we are working and regularly attend the TAC meetings. But I think what's very exciting, and we had a press conference on this a couple weeks ago, is the working group, Terry J. being one of our members, has come up with a work of love and vision, which is the LGBTQ Resource Guide. This guide includes legal help, health type clinic information, housing, a variety of crisis networks that members of the LGBTQ community can use. Where is this available? Not only at all 21 geographic areas, we are distributing them to city facilities, the council districts have them, and in conjunction with the Safe Place Initiative, which is the second completed initiative we have, and I'll discuss that in a minute, business locations throughout the city will have this pamphlet as well. Why this is so important is it's the first time we have actually seen all resources under one roof, so to speak. We have vetted each and every provider here, including immigration, reference needs. Everything is in this one-stop shop. But when I presented this to Chief Beck about a month and a half ago, he suggested that we put this on an app. So this resource guide is currently available on Google Play, on Android, and in probably the next 2 weeks on all Apple devices as well. So I think this is very important because even if folks don't want to come to an LAPD station, there is a way for them to get connected with a variety of needs or pass this on to a friend who may need them. The second deliverable that came from the working group is, and I'm holding up this decal right here, it's called the Safe Place Initiative. The Safe Place Initiative had its start in Seattle. There was an officer named Jim Ritter, and he believed that there should be a public-private partnership to kind of mirror safe passages for our children on their way to school, where members of the LGBTQ community who may feel that as they're going to and from their daily activities are being harassed are being targeted in some way for a potential hate incident or hate crime, if they pass by a location that has this decal on its door or in one of its windows, they can feel free to come in there, get assistance on a voluntary basis by these businesses to either get a hold of a law enforcement agency or some other organization that will fit their need at that time. This partnership is being piloted right now in Hollywood area and Northeast Division. We're hoping to take it citywide. We have over 60 businesses that have agreed to be part of this initiative, but we're very excited that Starbucks Corporation has agreed that they will take the Safe Place initiative citywide in the city of Los Angeles. So at every Starbucks location coming soon, this decal will be affixed to the window or the door, and those will become safe places as well. So we're very proud and appreciative deeply of the partnership of Starbucks on this initiative. Also, some of the other things that we've been working on, we've actually attended presentations at CSUN because we hear that the Valley sometimes feels underrepresented or underserved by LGBTQ organizations, and their community needs there as well. I participated in some discussions out there a few weeks ago. We also have participated in the Transgender Economic Empowerment Project, and I believe Jules was there present, where we're again talking about a job fair to empower and help employ members of the transgender community who still feel that getting employment and really livable employment is a problem for them. The Long Beach Pride Parade also had an LAPD representation, and back in February at the Black Cat, I attended with Jules and Ian the anniversary event there in Silver Lake. Weekly also, the members of CRD that you see here present have a weekly call with me at 9 a.m. where we review any LGBTQ issues that are occurring citywide so we can maintain communication and keep our finger on the pulse of matters before they become of greater concern. I also have to discuss very briefly here the support we get from the Office of Operations with regard to dialing in all of the area and patrol COs to LGBTQ community concerns in their respective areas. And they may be different. They may be larger scale in some locations, in others a little bit smaller in scale. But what I think is very important is the COs understand the chief's directive that all LGBTQ matters also be given the utmost attention and in an expeditious manner. Racer Division also, as you see in the racer alerts that come out when we have a hate crime or hate incident involving a member of the LGBTQ community, I'm not only given the notification you get via email, a phone call is also generated to me, doesn't matter what time of the day or night, and I'm able to immediately follow up and connect with the area CO and the bureau chief in the area of occurrence. I think over the weekend we saw that become very fruitful with a assault with a deadly weapon incident that occurred in Newton area, where two suspects pointed a handgun at two members of the LGBTQ community, unprovoked incident, and I contacted the Newton commanding officer and the bureau chief, Chief Arcos. Immediately that evening, follow-up was done involving the GED there, the Gang Enforcement Detail, and Metropolitan Division, and arrests were made. So this is the type of connectivity that is not artificial. It's not just something we like to say we do. We want to see tangibles in all we do. I don't care if it's the working group or as a department as a whole. We have to deliver the goods. Talk is nice, discussions are great, but people are going to believe, why should I trust LAPD? Why should I be a part of any of these endeavors if there's nothing at the end of the day that we can deliver? So I think that's very important for us to discuss here as well. Also, we partner with different organizations as well. And I know that Hollywood area and West Bureau has worked with the APAIT, particularly acknowledgement to Jasmine Creighton, who has done what we call the Midnight Strolls in Hollywood area, where Jasmine, a wonderful transgender activist, will go out there in the field with service providers, at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., and reach out to the community to see what we can deliver as far as when people are in need at their most vulnerable hours. And I know that Jules has also been a part of that. Ian has as well. And again, when I talk about the partnership, I think it's very important to underscore. A decade ago, it used to be when LAPD was involved in any venture, it was LAPD's the big body in the room. And it's nice to have all of you along, but we're going to set the agenda. Chief Beck has made it very clear to us that that's not the way we do business. That's not the way you grow collaborations. That's not the way you create networking. It has to be a 50-50 proposition, if not more. We have to ensure that we bring groups that have a differing voice and opinion into this conversation. It is not all about us. It's all about the whole if we're really serious about enacting and making change. As we move forward, some of the things that are on our horizon as far as goals, particularly bringing that Safe Place initiative into a citywide collaboration. Besides the 2 pilot locations, Starbucks is the beginning, but we're getting other interest and other people on board, including the Youth Policy Institute that says we want to be a part of this. Their locations are also on board. They also would like to do a study of the Safe Place initiative to see how it's really interacting with the community. Is that initiative really being used out here? And I've discussed this with Mr. Kirkpatrick, and we're going to be planning on doing that in the future. Also working with the TAC on a potential days of dialogue or some form of that, where the members of the transgender community can come with an agenda set by the TAC, but with LAPD participating. We also talked about taking that concept further because many members of the transgender community have said they have some challenges with smaller outside agencies, and we were thinking possibly in the future of bringing a collaboration where we had smaller agencies in there as well as the larger agencies as well. Also, I think it's very important to note here as I conclude that we're going to be looking at more outreach within South Los Angeles and the Valley, so the both ends of the city. Especially with South LA, I've talked to members of In the Meantime Men, an organization there on Pico Boulevard, about bringing some meetings there. They are a very robust organization, great collaboration in the past with several specific members, and we're thinking that we need to provide more focus there. So one of the initiatives and goals going forward is to bring the discussion and raise the voices of the folks in that community. The other very important initiative moving forward is, again, I'm coming back, circling to the transgender community. In 2016, 22 transgender women of color were murdered in the United States. I think that's a conservative number. Some numbers show a little bit higher, but when we talk to the Human Rights Coalition and others, that's the general number we're talking about. 22 clearly too many. When we look at 2017, we're in this midway point. Already 12 transgender women of color have been murdered somewhere in the United States of America in 2017. Some by people known to them, some by strangers. So again, it highlights the needs of the community. They're feeling that their safety is jeopardized. How do we improve that picture? And the LGBTQ working group and the department wants to look at that in a very pointed manner and see what we can do to help educate and change the dynamics of that, and also have members of the community who still may feel disenfranchised or staying a little bit away from law enforcement in those shadows, to let them be aware that we are opening those doors and we want that conversation to take place. So I just wanted to share that as goals moving forward. In conclusion, calendar of events looking forward that we will be participating in: the Stonewall anniversary coming up June 28th, Models of Pride, which highlights youth initiatives for the LGBTQ community, and panels. Last year it was at USC. That's coming up October 8th. National Coming Out Day, October 11th. The Transgender Day of Remembrance, November 20th, and World AIDS Day on December the 1st. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the fantastic work that you're doing, and thanks for the report. Any questions?
I'd just like to commend your work, and particularly in this moment where there's a national climate that emboldens some hateful people and creates more fear and distrust among vulnerable communities like the LGBTQ communities. I really appreciate the extra proactive work that you've done to build those partnerships and build trust. And I've attended a number of your trainings and events and have been incredibly impressed by what an obvious labor of love it is, as well as a commitment of the highest and strongest kind by you and the Chief Beck, and just also commend the specific accomplishments in terms of the resource guide and the app and the Safe Places Initiative and the TAC and the working group. So thank you all so much for your work.
Thank you very much.
The sticker, the Starbucks sticker?
Yes.
Tell me what it means again.
This will be placed in locations, either windows or doors, of businesses that agree to volunteer to be part of this initiative, which is their doors are freely open to members of the LGBTQ community or anyone who feels a need because their safety is being threatened either by maybe somebody following, harassing them on the street, and they need a safe place, which is temporary in nature, to come to maybe call a police agency, any type of outreach group that they may feel comfortable with. And it will be that particular person that will dictate what those needs are. It is strictly voluntary. People agree to be part of this. Nobody is compelled to be part of this project. But we have had great response from a diverse cross-section of the community, including a couple McDonald's that are in the Hollywood area. Some great support for this as well. Also, I just wanted to note that the production of the pamphlets and the decals was at no cost to the city. These were based on donations and people who felt compelled to help us with the graphics and the creation of these. Over 10,000 pamphlets have already been distributed.
Should they be on every police car?
That's.
Isn't that a safe?
I agree. All the stations will have it as well. So,
I understand.
Yeah, all the officers also. The geographic areas have these as well.
Can I have one?
You can have this one right here and now. How's that for service, Mr. Silva?
Chief Gamala, I too want to compliment the work that you've described and your commitment and that of your teams and the entire department and working group for the efforts and the outcomes related to this project. I'm interested, since it was an oral report, and I don't want to take long, but I'm very interested in how this particular working group model came about and how the members of the working group were established. I, am extremely supportive and enthusiastic in connection with our policy and actually other kinds of efforts being informed by members of the community. And this is just, this seems a little unique to me.
Thank you very much. It was in approximately 2009 where Chief Beck saw the need for us to address especially issues that came up in our jail system. And then Assistant Chief, now retired, Sandy Jo MacArthur, put together a small group of individuals who were involved in policy, some were educated in legal issues, and they came together, plus grassroots as well. And they came together to take a fresh look at LAPD policy with regard to incarceration. That's somewhat where the core of this group began. From that came revised policy, revised intake forms to ensure that if there is a member of the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community, who finds themselves incarcerated within an LAPD jail, there is a better semblance of safety and respect that is given to that individual during that process. From that, word of mouth came that there are other issues that we could work on. And those wonderful tentacles, in this case, came about with also some of my connectivity to the LGBTQ community when I was the captain in Hollywood area. So we started to invite people to the conversation. Jules and Ian also brought people forward, Captain Ruby Malachi as well, now Captain Neil. And we have a body of about 30 to 35 people who will consistently come to our meetings, usually held every 30 days, sometimes depending on calendars and holidays, every 2 months. And we sit in the ComStat room, and we sit there and we ask them, what do you want to put on our agenda? Not what LAPD thinks needs to be on the agenda. Then it's almost a wonderful metamorphosis. You'll have smaller breakout groups who say, I'd like to work on this project. For example, the LGBTQ guide came from one of our members, Terry J. And Terry J said, I'd like to work on that. And then you coalesce and have maybe 5 to 7 people work on that. But I just really want to emphasize here, as you ask me this question, what we didn't want the working group to be was a feel-good, bring out the pizza and danishes, we sit there, and people grow weary. And that's why we've been able to sustain this group coming forward, sacrificing their time and energy on a consistent basis. It didn't start out with 30, and now we have 5. And they're all LAPD cheerleaders. That's not how this group works, because it's not going to have credibility, and there will be no tangibles from this. So I think what's very important to emphasize is we appreciate and respect and welcome the different points of view, because that's how some of these projects came about.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I have the comment on the event this weekend while she's up?
Oh, the Resist? Yes. Again, great work by, and I'll recognize Chief Dennis Cotto, Captain Corey Palka. When the idea of the Resist March was going to come up, one of the organizers, Brian Pendleton, had reached out to me so that he could get connected with the right people within West Bureau. What's so wonderful about that is how Brian, who I had never met before, found me was, again, through members of the working group. So again, the working group has a reverberating effect where even others who are not dealing with this on a daily basis feel at least there's a point of contact, for lack of a better term. I immediately, as soon as I emailed Brian, called Corey Palka. He picked up the phone, and plans were in place to respect the messaging, the First Amendment rights of all the participants, not to make it appear that it was a LAPD convergence, but to keep safety at the forefront, where there was a comfort level for people to come and strike the balance between a police presence for safety and folks believing that it was still their march and their First Amendment expression. And there was a beautiful collaboration there, a series of meetings. Again, kudos to West Bureau and to Captain Palka for making that happen.
Great, thank you. Do we have any comment on this item?
Yes, sir. We have one comment card. We have Tiffany Guerra.
So what I'm interested to hear most about, and what I didn't hear addressed today, was how you plan to deal with the racial bias of your officers when interacting with the LGBTQ community. Race is an issue here because within the LGBTQ community, the folks that are more likely to be unhoused or to be experiencing poverty, and therefore who are more likely to have encounters with police, are those who are Black or people of color. When an officer has an encounter with one of these folks, a queer, trans, Black person, or person of color, that officer is going to be responding to all aspects of their identity and their presentation. But likely they're going to be responding first to that person's race, as that is one of the most visible aspects of a person's presentation. So I'll ask again, when we talk about outreach to the LGBTQ community, how is racism and the racial bias of officers being incorporated into the conversation? How is it being acknowledged and addressed? It was surreal to hear you talk about I believe it was called the Safe Passage Initiative, and keeping LGBTQ people safe. You were talking about this being a program based in Hollywood, which is over 80% white, and establishing Starbucks locations as safe places. The fact that you would even invest in this as a program or suggest that as a program shows how ludicrously out of touch you are with who actually needs protection in the community. And it shows that you're completely separated from the fact that the police is not able to provide a safe place or safe passage. You're not the ones that should be that are able to provide those places. So what we need to hear about is how race and racial bias and racism in the LAPD is being addressed in your outreach, because that is a major issue.
And we have no other comment cards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the report. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we're now on item 2C, Department's report. Department's report dated May 25th, 2017,
as the LAPD.
relative to the first quarter report on homelessness and mental illness.
It's all PR, BS.
Brian, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Board. Morning, Chief. The first quarter report came in, and basically, again, it was based a large part on the work and the effort that's been done by the Los Angeles Police Department under the direction of Chief Beck and in correlation with the Commission. And the support that you have given in this endeavor is greatly appreciated. We had the opportunity to have a specific homeless police commission meeting. And again, we focused on a lot of ideas and a lot of things that have been generated over the past year, year and a half, related specifically to the department's endeavors to impact, to help, to work with the homeless community. Again, I think it was important on that event as well to realize that, again, different ideologies are in place when dealing with the homeless population and the homeless community. But the one thing that this department strives to do is to serve everybody, whether you're homeless or whether you're impacted by homeless in the communities. And again, that's what this report hopefully reflected. And with that, I'm able and willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Question, what do you mean by different ideologies?
I guess from the perspective of when we work with different groups who are involved in the homeless endeavors and homeless situation that we see unfolding, there are some groups that, again, focus strictly on the population of the homeless individual, which is something we strive to serve as well. But then as law enforcement, we also have to make sure that we work and serve the people that are also impacted by that homeless situation. For us, again, in the city of Los Angeles, the dynamics have changed drastically over the past, I'd say, 3 to 4 years, where before we would see a population in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. And the homeless population really had not gone out into other communities, into other locations. Now we have seen it where, again, almost all of the 21 commands in the city of Los Angeles in some way are greatly, greatly impacted by a homeless population. And again, that's changed the dynamics not only for the homeless individual, because again, when you look at those encampments, when you look at those areas where the homeless are at, for Skid Row, again, it was based a lot on where the services were, where the missions were, where food were, where medicine was, where treatment programs could be. But then when you start looking at some of the other 21 commands, those anchor points aren't necessarily there, and yet we still have these large encampments. And so again, for the department to make sure that we are serving both the homeless individuals and then also serving those communities, it's definitely a balance act. And there's some ideologies where it's strictly care for the homeless, and that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we have opportunities, options, that we collaborate with different groups to provide services and referrals and housing. But at the same token, if those are not accepted, we want to make sure that we have alternatives to support those people and those individuals and those communities that are impacted as well.
Is there a follow-up question? Okay.
I'm still processing the answer. I'll have additional questions later.
Okay.
Thank you for your work on the report. I have a few questions.
Yes.
The first is, at the hearing, some members of the public shared that some people experiencing homelessness are fearful of the police and that having police be involved with outreach may be discouraging some people from accepting services. So I wanted to see if you could just kind of share your experience or the experience of your officers and how you deal with that.
Yeah, again, I think that's one of the important things, and that was something that Chief Beck definitely pressed into how we were going to approach and how we were going to impact homelessness. It was going to be a different model. It was going to be a different frame. And I do think there was some reconciliation that needed to be done, specifically related to the homeless population. And I think with the development and with the training, with the collaboration that went into the HOPE teams, a lot of that is happened. It's still a work in progress, without question. But trying to take the fear of the homeless population, of law enforcement, and have them realize that we are here to serve them as much as we are to serve anybody else, it's been a work in progress. When you look at our number of contacts that we've had, again, the HOPE teams, which again is not a lot of officers, we're basically talking 4 officers and 38 officers and 4 supervisors. They have made over 10,300 contacts, almost 11,000 contacts year to date as of right now. And you know, that's with that information. When you look at the population, they've made about 1,000 contacts related to individuals that have a mental illness. When you look at the arrest, specifically to the number of individuals that had been arrested, the numbers are actually very, very low. You look in the hundreds, possibly out of 11,000 plus. You might have 100 for felony warrants, 30, 40, and I have the exact numbers for you, but again, none of them range anywhere near the percentage of the number of contacts that our officers are making. And to build that trust level, again, it doesn't change overnight. It's a process, and with the framing, with the building out of these groups and these officers that, again, not only have the desire to do it, but also have the training and the expertise to do it based upon the MHIT training that went into location with all of our officers, with the escalation, de-escalation, with the bias training that's going into place right now with our officers. We're ensuring that they are equipped to handle an incredibly, incredibly complex problem. And so with that, with not just being a heavy arm of enforcement or the heavy arm of telling individuals, hey, pick up your stuff and move, but the actual ability to collaborate with entities outside of Los Angeles Police Department, with LASA, with sanitation, that can offer real-time assistance and guidance and referrals. That's, again, where we have kind of changed and hopefully are changing the dynamics of that relationship with law enforcement and our homeless population.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit more about the training, the specialized training that officers receive, both HOPE officers and all officers, in dealing with people who are experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, for our officers that are specifically in HOPE and in RESET, all of them have attended mental health intervention training, which again is a very important component of it, because a lot of the officers, or a lot of the officers that deal with the homeless population, the population that they are dealing with, are dealing with major issues, major life issues. Some of those are mental health issues. A lot of them are narcotics or substance abuse issues, or it's a combination of both. And so by ensuring that our officers have a clear understanding or a knowledge of who they are dealing with and how they can best deal with those particular situations that they may be confronted with, that's where the mental health intervention training really comes into play. This is something that we're trying not to do just for our HOPE officers, but do for all of our officers. When you look at our goals and Chief Beck's desire to make sure that we have a clear understanding of both escalation and de-escalation, again, I think we've taken something that has been in this organization for a very, very long time, but we have codified it. We have put it into a training. We have put it into a structure that, again, all of the officers are going through to understand what they need to do, what they can do for the de-escalation component when dealing with people in crisis.
Great. And I understand you have a trauma-informed training in working with homeless women?
Yes. Actually, and that was something, too, when we looked at our last police commission meeting that was a sole purpose on homelessness. The one thing we wanted to focus on was making sure that individuals, again, who had different concepts, different ideas, but still understood the need to collaborate on the homeless endeavor, that we listened to those ideas and those concepts. And so for the last meeting, we had Inner City Law Firm that came, and they talked a lot about clinicians and the SMART team and a structure that's in the city of Pasadena. So again, we wanted to look at that and verify how was that training done and how was it incorporated. Again, for Pasadena, they only have 3 officers that are doing it, and basically they're set up in a configuration that's similar to what Lieutenant Bixler does in the SMART team. So again, we're at a completely different level in a different location. But also what we wanted to do is make sure that we had follow-up with those individuals. And so again, for mental health intervention training, to date we've had 1,264 officers that have completed it citywide. On collaboration, all the HOPE teams are working with Department of Mental Health already, which was a component that came out of the inner-city law firm. For our homeless and health care, that was another event that came up, and another group that talked about the training that the officers get and what they would like to see and what they would like to see mirrored in that organization. And so with that, one thing that they talked about was services, not punishment, syringe exchange, overdose prevention programs, and things like that. And so on January the 23rd of 2017, all of our HOPE officers and all of our RESET officers have been trained for the use of Narcan. We are in the process now of working through it organizationally to get that Narcan substance out so that, again, we can have real-time connection with somebody who is having an opioid-induced death. To be very honest, that's exactly what it does. It's an inhibitor. So all of our officers, once we go through some different steps with our organization, we are going to be able to have Narcan out. And we're hoping to get that Narcan not only to our HOPE officers, but also get it department-wide. We reached out and we had training with the Downtown Women's Center. That was something that came out of LA CAN. They had the idea or the concept, and they talked about, are we having our individual officers that are involved in HOPE and RESET given the trauma-informed care training by the Downtown Women's Center. And that training actually occurred before that meeting. It occurred again on April the 23rd of the 17, and we utilized all of our HOPE officers to receive that training. So again, that is really something that we are trying to do, and I think organizationally, like Chief Grimala talked about before, we realize that we have to be in partnership. That in order to serve, we have to have different ideas, different concepts, and different input. And that's really what, again, this HOPE concept, this intervention on the homelessness, is exactly what we are striving to do.
Thank you.
So-
go ahead.
Do you have more?
I have a couple of questions about RESET. Can you talk a little bit more about the use of force by RESET? I understand the circumstances in Skid Row, might be different in other parts of the city, but would like to talk about how we can think about reducing the use of force by RESET.
Absolutely, and to put that into a picture, I guess I kind of want to give the idea of where we are. For the HOPE teams, again, over 11,000 contacts. We've had 3 use of forces. For the RESET, they've had 48 use of forces. Again, Skid Row is a very unique environment. It's an environment that is incredibly challenging to police, and it's something that, again, it's also some, again, the mental health issues that go on there, the narcotics issues that go on in there. It's very, very challenging. As a matter of fact, 47% of all violent crime in Central area, so 47% is in the Skid Row area, which is basically a half-mile, 52-block city block area. It makes up 47%. We have had a total of 12 homicides in Central, which again is a 5-mile radius. Out of those 12 homicides, we have had 6 that have been in the Skid Row area. So again, those are the challenges that the officers are confronted with. But again, with that as well, that again comes the training component. It comes the contact component. It comes the recalibrating of making sure that we have LASA workers that are going to be specifically assigned with those RESET officers there for alternatives. It's the escalation, de-escalation approach. So again, when you look at the numbers that are involved there, when you look at the issues that are going on in that incredibly complex place, and again, a lot of these use of forces too, I think it's important to understand, out of the 48, and I don't have the exact numbers, this is anecdotal, and so I don't want to give you bad information, but a lot of the enforcement, a lot of the things that the officers do, it's not necessarily on the individuals that are actually homeless in Skid Row. There's an element that comes from the outside that officers in RESET have to also contend with. Individuals who come in to victimize the homeless, to sell drugs to the homeless. We have a number of gangs that come into the Skid Row area specifically to supply narcotics. In turn, that causes a lot of issue and a lot of conflict within there. So out of those 48, again, out of the 1,800 plus arrests that they have made, that's where they're actually at with the 48.
That's helpful. My last question about Reset. So what is the new data on Reset that will be included in the third quarter report, and when are we going to receive that?
The new third quarter report will be done on the upcoming due dates, and the information that we're going to supply on there is basically kind of, again, a recalibration of what Reset does and how they function and how they perform their task. Again, the HOPE team, it wasn't new information. It wasn't new developments. All 21 commands had some way of dealing with the homeless situation, whether it was a transient car, a HOPE car, a HEART car. The HOPE teams basically just centralized it and then brought in a team of entities outside of the organization, LAPD, to collaborate with us. That's what we're looking to do and mirror again with Reset, so that it's not just an enforcement component, but other components are in place. The LASA components are in place. The LA SAN components in place, where again, much of the enforcement that they have to do is related specifically to 5611 and the implementation of that new LAMC. With that, we want to make sure that LA SAN, again, is taking on the responsibility that they were tasked with under that, and it doesn't fall strictly on the shoulders of the department. So that's what you'll see in the upcoming reports.
We need to think about storage.
Thank you very much.
Homeless people rather than throwing them. Sir, if you have a comment, please submit a card.
How come you didn't tell me that, but you tell that to a black person?
Sir, can you please stop disrupting the meeting? If you disrupt the meeting again, I'm going to ask you to leave.
So I have a couple of observations. First, I continue to be very supportive of the amount of focus and resources that the department is directing toward grappling with the significant human crisis that our city is confronting, and certainly appreciate the special impacts that it has in connection with law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement has a unique role to play, and it is all the more complicated when it is sort of superimposed on or confronting people who are suffering from the stresses of being both homeless, potentially suffering from some level of mental illness and or some level of drug addiction. That said, I do have some concerns that arose both in connection with the special meeting and probably, and I will say some new ones related to the ideology comment today, which I would certainly like to explore in greater detail, probably not in this meeting. Among the things, though, that I think would be, that I am still interested in understanding and that I think would be significantly to our advantage, would be greater interaction with those members of this particular community that serve in the role of advocates and that spend their time, the nonprofits, not just the governmental entities, but the nonprofits, the citizens out there that devote their time to also trying to serve and to more specifically and almost exclusively trying to serve this community. The model that was described by Chief Grimala as it relates to a working group which includes nonprofit and other advocates from the impacted community, I thought was quite apropos in connection with other issues that we confront, and this one in particular. I think that it is, and again, I appreciate the magnitude of what the department is dealing with, and so don't want to be overly critical that it's not all done. I certainly, while have not been involved with the HOPE teams, have sat through the MEU training, and that was quite extraordinary. And so, and I know of a number of other efforts that are underway, but I believe that these efforts would benefit tremendously from more direct and consistent collaboration with community members who are serving in the roles of advocates and service providers. So I would make that comment, and am happy to work with you and those entities to facilitate that. I also want to say that I was particularly troubled in the first iteration of your report by your response to a question. That question being, what is your greatest challenge? What do you see as the greatest challenge to our efforts? And what you identified was, lawsuits. And I sort of sat, because it was a long hearing. You made reference a couple of times to lawsuits or the courts. And, the immediate thought for me was, you mean the application of constitutional protections to to people who are homeless. I mean, that's what you're talking about when you say that my big challenge is, people's rights being asserted and affirmed or determined by the courts in a way that makes my job inconvenient. And that was significantly concerning to me, and is something that I think we should reconsider as our biggest problem. And then with respect to, and you did make reference to in your prior presentation, and again, we can talk about it in a different context, this idea that somehow it's different when it leaves Skid Row in terms of what our role is as it relates to the homeless population. I'm not clear that I really understand that. And I'm seriously concerned about what the implications of that could be from whether you call it ideology or expectations or whatever. One of the things that people are significantly concerned about in various communities is this sense that issues manifested in one community versus another demand a different level of attention, or somehow result in different practices. So I'd like to, spend some time and thinking about that. And in my view, that too underscores the need for a broader range of perspectives as it relates to our planning and the development of the work that we're doing. This is critically important. I know that with the very best intentions, this department is focused on this issue and the challenges presented by it, but I cannot tell you how much I am committed to and how much I believe that that focus must include a broader array of perspectives and inputs.
And the department will be glad to work with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Absolutely happy to work with you on any ideas, any concepts, anything that we can do better. That's what we're here to do, is to really try to make this situation better for everybody involved.
Yeah, the homeless services.
Thank you. In light of the recent census, which showed a significant increase in our homeless population, do you think we need to look at further expanding our HOPE and RESET teams, the number of officers we have assigned to those units?
Again, that yeah.
Yeah.
We do look at that, but it's a balance of resources, and then it's also a commitment from our partners to provide resources. One of the reasons the department is so involved in these teams is because this is one way to get services from other entities, is for us to split the freight with them. And so, and I've always said, especially with SMART teams and with HOPE teams, as many service providers as will work with us, we will supply the police resources. So we'll continue to do that, but a lot of it is dependent on our partners.
With us?
Do you think we should be putting more pressure on our county partners to provide more resources?
It's always a balance. They're providing resources not only to the city of Los Angeles, but they're trying to replicate them in their own, complete jurisdiction and responsibility with the sheriff and things like that. So, we'll continue to make the ask, of course, and all of the department heads are very well aware that particularly Department of Mental Health, that as many people as they will put forward, I will match.
And the one thing, Mr. Johnson, if I can say also, we've had incredibly good fortune and good luck with our homeless CompStat. And we have our 5th iteration of that happening very shortly. And again, that's something where entities, not only in law enforcement, but also from throughout county and as well as private, come in and we actually have that discussion and then that accountability part. And that's one thing that we're going to discuss on our next upcoming CompStat is specifically what are going to be the impacts of Triple H and H. And then what can we start looking at as far as extrapolating that out to where we are going to go and what can we expect and what can't we expect, so we have a realistic idea on that.
Excellent. Any other questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I just wanted to make this comment. Although this commission did honor the Hope teens with the unit citation medal, I did want to make sure that that Reset and the SMART teams and other work done by our officers in Skid Row is appreciated and valued by us. I know that much of the work and strategies that have been worked on for many years have been integrated in what the Hope teams are doing now. So I just wanted to say that and put that out there, that they are just as valued.
They are absolutely as valued. And again, thank you so much for that. Again, what the Hope team represents is it's carried on the shoulders of a lot of officers for a very long time who have been out there day in and day out doing an incredible job, coming up with innovative ways to do things, and we just were able to take a look at that and then centralize it. But again, this wasn't anything new under the sun. It was just trying to do it better, do it ethically, do it constitutionally, and making sure that our officers are prepared to handle the issues and the complexity of what they are confronted with. So again, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Any comments on this item?
We have 11 comment cards. The first 4, Craig R., Steve Diaz, Christine Gadsden, and Peace Between Residents.
Good morning.
Is it really? Craig R., L.A. Can, straight out of Skid Row. And regarding the first quarter report, the report chronicles the launching of Hope teams in Valley Bureau, West Bureau, Central Bureau, and South Bureau. But I believe Central Division to date still doesn't have dedicated Hope teams in an area that clearly needs a new non-enforcement driven strategy. The data highlights that over 11,000 homeless individuals were contacted by Hope teams and that 2,563 were referred to housing. It goes on to say that, quote, unfortunately, only 447 accepted various forms of housing that were offered, unquote. So what exactly was what type of housing was this that was offered by the department? Was it a shelter? Was it a cot? Was it permanent housing as defined by the federal government? Where exactly did the department find 447 housing options during the height of the recent homeless crisis that continues to swell in numbers to this very day? Data of this sort is precious and needed now, as it appears based on this report that LAPD is offering residents house keys instead of handcuffs. But we in LA Can know that this is not truthful, nor a reality experienced by those actually paid to provide housing to houseless people. So, so-called transparency and so-called data is completely meaningless and worthless unless it's true. And this stuff may be more worthless than worthless. It may be deception. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is
Morning.
Steve Diaz, and I am with LA CAN. Just to be clear, the question on the table is not about services. Everyone wants services. Everybody wants increased services in their community. The question is who should be providing those services. 40 hours of training does not equal enough to be able to interact with people with mental health issues, does not equal enough to interact, honestly, with half of us in this room with the personalities that we have. So that's the question that we should be focusing on. Additionally, earlier on, it was talked about there's a change or a difference in philosophy between Skid Row and out of Skid Row. You know what that philosophy is? It's the use of force and how policing occurs. For example, in the report, it states that Reset does not collect some of the data that's being asked for. Why is that? But yet it also highlights that the use of force in Reset is higher than the use of force being used in Hope teams, just to give folks an idea. So there are numbers. Lastly, it's imperative that we not just hear the bubbles and the beautiful story that's being told before you, but we dig deeper into the data and the questions at hand. For example, what are the connections between SMART and CAMP? How is it that housing services are being provided, not being provided, and the mismatch of wording that happens between one report and the report you're about to hear in the second agenda item following this? Excuse me. Additionally, it's extremely important that we examine how Reset is being interacted in Skid Row. The Reset team clearly does not deserve a medal, does not deserve praise, especially when it has a higher use of force than other communities. To be very clear, I would actually disagree that Hope deserves them as well, but that's a whole different issue. So I staunchly urge this commission to really look at the data, ask the questions, and really follow up with the police commission, really follow up with the police department to really articulate why is it that data is missing, where is that data, why is some of that data not collected, where are those housing units, what are those services, because the question is not services, it's who's providing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Matt asked if we should be, or you should be expanding the Hope and Reset teams, and I would just like to answer no, absolutely not. And if you honestly think that expansion of LAPD's involvement in health and social services is the answer, you really aren't paying attention. LAPD needs to get out of these issues that it has no business being in, not get further entrenched in them. Last year, this board enacted a policy of requiring LAPD officers to treat houseless individuals with empathy and compassion, and that just is not happening. In the past year, LAPD has killed 2 Skid Row residents living with mental illness and continues to have incredibly high and unacceptable rates of police interaction, arrests, and use of force under the ongoing Safer Cities Initiative, or Reset. Many, if not most, mental health emergencies in the Skid Row community are not related to any crime and should not be it should not have LAPD response. Houselessness is not a crime. Living with mental health issues is not a crime. Why this organization is involved in those issues is beyond me. It's not your job. Stop trying to do it. If you're really interested in a safer city, get out of these issues. Though not involved in their organization, I would like to support the Los Angeles Community Action Network in their demands to firstly remove the Safer Cities Initiative task force from Skid Row. The concentration of the officers within this very small neighborhood makes police interaction a regular occurrence and will prevent the necessary shift from police to Department of Mental Health for emergency responses to mental health crises. And LAPD's practice and policy of utilizing SMART team solely in the Central Division building. It's completely against the purpose of that team. If you're going to involve yourselves, then utilize it where it can actually maybe do some difference, which is in Skid Row.
Good morning.
Good morning. Prentice Jenkins, Peace Between Residents and Police. Good morning, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Soboroff, Chief, entire commission. The reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated since I wasn't here last week. I I would suggest that when we're dealing with police officers interacting with homeless individuals who are mentally ill, remember, mental illness is something that you must have some type of training or psychiatric training for. I suggest that you bring on psychiatrists to deal with mental illness, because when you're actually dealing with mental illness, individuals out there with mental illness will you disturb them sleeping, they'll turn over and start slicing on you, because they process the information different than we are. Hello to us is hello. Hello to a mentally ill person is you're trying to attack me. They don't see a badge. They don't see blue uniforms. They just see someone trying to attack them because they're wired different than we are, which means their wires are crossed or their wires are unplugged. And it's extremely dangerous dealing with mental illness out there and dealing with the homeless. Remember, it was President Reagan who threw all those mentally ill people out on the street over 30-something years ago. And we're continuing to pile up mentally ill people on the street. It's my suspicion that one day an officer is going to be killed by a mentally ill person, or just like what happened to Charlie Africa, a mentally ill person was killed by an officer. The last thing we want to see is that sort of thing. So bring in psychiatrists for these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next four speakers, General Dogan, Ashley Richardson Hall, Michelle Dumont, and Wesley Walker.
Good morning.
General Dogan, human and civil rights organizer with LA CAN. I read the report, and there's many holes and problems with the report, too many to talk about in 2 minutes. But I will say, what you say on paper, and what you do on the streets is totally two different things. Commander now. Commander Chamberlain speak as though they angels coming from heaven, to save the homeless. When in fact, Captain Chamberlain, Commander Chamberlain, I remember you when you was Captain Chamberlain of Central Division. And it was under this guy's leadership in which Central Division in the city of Los Angeles won the Mini City Award for the worstest police station in America for policing the homelessness. And you can Google that, the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty. For the last decade, LA CAN has been coming to this commission, even under John Mack, and we've been explaining to you what the problem is. And nothing has happened. So again, we're here again to deliver this. We're here to put our recommendations and our demands to this board. And hopefully moving forward, you will listen to them. And just like he said earlier, they listened to us one time, and they did the training at the Downtown Women's Center, and everything came out great. Well, we need you to keep listening and keep working with those recommendations, and hopefully one day LAPD will get it. Also, I want to say that you must remove killer cops from our community. Francisco Martinez, the cop that killed Charlie Africa, is not only still doing tent checks in our community, but to make the matter worse, he's been promoted to senior lead. And this is something that we will not retaliate, will not have on Skid Row. And so I ask you to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why, hello.
Good morning.
Ashley Richardson Hall. I'm representing myself in my work, Community Resiliency and Know Your Rights Collective for Mental Health in Skid Row. This is not a group about mental illness. This is a group about mental health. As a formerly incarcerated person not too long ago, please listen. Our mission is to research, understand, and educate ourselves and our community about the current mental health policies and practices in order to reclaim our power and experiences, Charlie Beck, while offering support in holistic community health and healing. Oops, I forgot a comma. Vision: to save lives affected by mental health conditions by ensuring all people know, understand, and reaffirm their rights in mental and physical health. ADA, anybody. EMT. The last agenda, 2/23, a month before you arrested me. Why do all the black kids sit at the table together? You will not steal my work through NAMI. Charlie Beck, I stand before you to demand an end to your mental health torture camps. I stand before you with my community. You know, the ones you keep trying to kill, the black folks. I stand before you to demand that you release my tapes. I am shaking. I want to see what you did to me. I stand before you with and in all of my power right here, my father-in-law and my father. I am carrying all of my love and all of my weight around my waist and my neck, and I can't carry anything else. Charlie Beck, I warned you that I'm a survivor and warrior of the current mental health policies in the United States, and you didn't believe me. Charlie Beck, you cannot kill Africa still. We are champions, and I am queen. Hand them over. Joseph Kony, Kalu, Charles, Charlie Beck, Lee Baca, 300s. Thank you.
Michelle Dumont.
Good morning.
It's not a good morning. It's not a good morning. That smirk will not get you anywhere with me. Let's get real. The LAPD does not serve the homeless. The LAPD does not serve the mentally ill. They police them. They arrest them. Amen. They persecute them. And you're so afraid of lawsuits because they use unnecessary force against them. They use all the powers they have, including calling the Bureau of Sanitation to remove their goods when they can't remove them themselves. What kind of an institution is this? I'll tell you what kind of an institution it is. It's an institution to support the wealth and property of this city. Skid Row has been being squeezed for years with the gentrification of downtown Los Angeles. The police support that gentrification and want that to continue. They are not on the side of affordable housing. They are not on the side of people who need any kind of mental help or support. They want to squeeze them into small pockets, contain them, and incarcerate them, and keep them away from the nice people who are gentrifying downtown LA. Well, you know what? We know that's what's happening. And we want that to stop. We want your monies that go to this resist to go to mental health suppliers. Okay? So the organizations in the county don't have the money? Give them your money. Take the police out and give it to mental health supporters who can really do a job.
Sir, if you have a comment, please submit a card.
Good morning. My name is Wesley Walker. I'm with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. Women in Skid Row speaks. While the idea of community-based policing is commonly mentioned in the news media and political discourse, the reality of Skid Row women is different. Over 1/3 of the survey respondents of the 2016 needs assessment has the police interaction over the last year. Of those women, 33% received citations, an increase from 2013 needs assessment. In addition, 40% was arrested. These numbers exemplify the lack of safety Skid Row women feel on a daily basis. We are recommending the need to address policing that criminalize homeless, such as quality of life tickets, continue to exacerbate the struggles of living on the street. In 2016, the city passed 3 new ordinances that criminalize the homeless individuals. I want to tell you about a little story I saw yesterday, an incident I seen yesterday at the corner of 6th and Towns, about 4:30 p.m. The fire department was there on that corner, and they was putting out a tent fire. And right next to that tent fire, there was a lady, a black lady, standing there minding her own business. And reset came up. I guess it was reset because I didn't see nobody else there, like the SMART team. They immediately arrest this lady, put her hands behind her back, and she gave them a little struggle, but it took 15 more cars to come there to arrest this one black lady. What happened to the house keys? And you gave her handcuffs.
Thank you for your comments.
The next three speaker cards, Matt Frank, Reed Heisley, and Hamid Khan.
Hi, my name is Reed Heisley. I live in Mar Vista, and I volunteer with the homeless in Venice Beach. And I just want to say LAPD has little credibility among the homeless living in Venice, especially because police in the last few years killed a couple of homeless men by overreacting to situations that were going on there. And so homeless in Venice are afraid of the police. And I think that the solution, as multiple people have mentioned, is not more policing, is not getting the police involved and more with interacting with the homeless, but it's getting other departments to deliver services like affordable housing. In the short run, we need bathrooms that are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, because that's one of the ways that homeless and police have the most contact. Is you get these Venice residents, these gentrifiers who just like call the police for everything, and then you get all these like citations and all these like this criminalization of homelessness, criminalization of going to the bathroom. All right. And so I think LAPD needs to, get out of homelessness and just try and, if they really care about it, advocate for services, for more housing, call out the council members who are blocking things like this, like Bonin. In addition to that, I just want to say that a young man, Pedro Echeverria, was shot by the LAPD, and he was denied medical care immediately. And then when he was in the hospital, his family wasn't allowed to see him until like a massive kind of calling campaign. People were saying, we want to see, we want the family to see Pedro. And so like the logic here is like, were they waiting for him to die? Did they not want his story to come out? Like his side of the story? Like dead men tell no tales. So we can't ever see what, he had to say about the confrontation that happened with him and LAPD officers. So that's not acceptable. We need, family to be able to see people who are victims of police violence as soon as possible and get their side of the story.
Matt Frank, Hamid Khan. Okay, we have no other comment cards. Oh, we have Mr. Khan.
So as of today, 540 people have been murdered by cops in the United States, which comes to every 7 hours and 42 minutes somebody being shot and killed by law enforcement in the United States. And 1 out of every 5 people who were shot and killed were mentally ill. So these are the statistics that we are looking at. I was not going to speak on this item and speak on the next one, but I wanted to pick up on the ideology comment. And I think that's really, really critical, because we need to look at that how these practices are informed, they are guided, and they are trained, and they are operationalized. Because it's the ideology that is based on the undesirable body. It's the ideology that is based on surplus humanity. It's the ideology that is based upon the dirty divide, a report that L.A. Can has published, and you should read that. A dirty divide, which is east of Main, south of 3rd, west of Central, and north of 8th. An ideology that maintains these containment zones with 4118Ds and 5611s. Where sitting on a sidewalk, if you don't have nowhere to go, is loitering. Where carrying anything more than a 60-gallon trash can of your belongings becomes a violation of law. So it required the Levon decision, it required the Jones decision to maintain some semblance of human dignity to people who are the undesirable, who are the surplus humanity, who need to be discarded as per this ideology. It's an ideology that rewards violence, which other people have said that Francisco Martinez is now being promoted after shooting and murdering Charlie Africa to a lead position. That's the ideology that we are dealing with. It's an ideology that denies residents of Skid Row to have their own little neighborhood council, a conspiracy that works against this by the city. It's an ideology that gives 87% of monies that are supposed to go to homeless services to LAPD. It's an ideology that gives 54% of general funds of the city of Los Angeles to law enforcement. So when we speak about ideology, we need to dig deeper because this is how the ideology is informed, and Chamberlain knows it very well. Thank you.
We have no other comment cards, sir.
Do I have a...
Thank you. I wanted to request a couple of report backs.
Yes.
So I know the city and county and our partners report a great deal of information in homeless CompStat meetings, and I've attended a couple of them and impressed with the depth and breadth that you tackle. Still, there's some additional statistical reports that I'd like to address. I have a kind of long list. Do I need to read it all, or can I submit it in writing?
Mr. Teefank?
Whichever the commissioner would like, we could. She can just indicate she'll submit it, and then we'll do a response back. But I'm sure the audience might want to know what those report backs will be, Commissioner. I would recommend you read it.
Thank you. Number of police and public contacts, number referred to housing, number referred to services in addition to housing, number referred for psychiatric care, number of homeless victims and for what type of crime, broken down by race and gender, number of homeless arrested and for what charges, and case dispositions if available, involvement of gangs in narcotics, prostitution, and human trafficking in and around Skid Row, a deeper level of analysis of domestic violence involving the homeless, and number of use of force incidents involving the homeless. In addition, I'd like to request a couple of report backs. I understand that Reset doesn't currently capture all of the requested data points, and the department is working on this, so I would like the department to work with the Inspector General's office on this to improve data collection for homelessness and mental health related issues. And if you could come back in 60 days with that. Second, an Inspector General review of use of force incidents involving people experiencing homelessness and or mentally ill individuals that are captured on video, body worn, in car, etc. And if you could come back with that in 90 days. And the third is Inspector General audit of complaints involving individuals in Skid Row. And if you could come back with that as well in 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the department's report?
So moved.
Do I have all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a card for this next item for you, Mr. Hayes.
I had a card on this item.
I think your card is on item 2D.
Huh?
Your card is on item 2D, which we're about to do right now.
No, I submitted 4 cards, and I have one on this item.
We've already closed the item, but I will give you an extra 2 minutes during we've already approved the item and moved on.
You submitted 2 cards for 2D.
Okay, we'll give you an extra 2 minutes in public comment.
You can't do that. You have a new attorney.
We've already approved the item and moved on.
You have a new attorney here. He will tell you can't do public comment on agenda items. Public comment is for non-agenda items.
It's for anything you would want to talk about.
Mr. President, if I may suggest, you could have a motion to reopen the item for the public comment of Mr. Hayes. Have that motion approved, and then hear his public comment.
Right.
So
Thank
moved.
You. We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Go ahead. You have your 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I was the president when Charlie Beck met William Noel. He was the most significant homeless person in L.A. He stayed on the corner of First and Broadway for 3 consecutive years. He never, ever moved. A judge lost his judgeship because of him, and the neighborhood prosecutor could not convict him. He took the stand in his behalf, and he acquitted himself. So you will find the L.A. Weekly had a front-page story on the man who smelled too much. William Noel had $5,000 in the custody of the LAPD and $7,000 in the custody of the Highway Patrol. They would not release his money because they claimed it was hazardous material, and indeed it was hazardous. Okay? But the federal agency called the Treasury Department will make all that money good. They put the gloves on liberty too. So he couldn't get his money. Finally, he got his money, and he got into an apartment. He had me go try to rent an apartment for him. Anyway, so at one time, we had hobos, we had tramps, we had vagrants, all of those things. Now we only have transient. All right? But I get disturbed when I hear 3 million people come through LAX annually. Why are they moving here? Why are they spending money to come here and go to other parts of the world? Because that's a human characteristic, to move about. They call it exploration, wanderlust, whatever. But those homeless people have that same concept about where they will go and what they will do. So when I came here initially, there was a call, Man Down, LAPD. Can you imagine that call taking place today?
Thank you. The item's already, we don't have to reapprove the item, do we? We don't have to reapprove the item, do we?
No?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're now on item number 2D, Department's report dated May 25th, 2017, relative to the report on the Department's response to calls for service involving individuals with mental illness.
Okay, we can go right to questions on this item.
Thanks. Thank you for being here.
Good
for
morning.
The report.
Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Morning.
What's so good about it?
Let's see. So can you talk about the response when a subject isn't presenting an immediate threat and what the role of SMART teams play when they respond prior to an arrest or booking?
Okay, so you're saying when they don't pose an immediate threat?
Right.
So a SMART is a crisis response, and they will only respond when there's a 911 call. So that would mean that there's a danger or there's a crisis occurring. So are you referring to something that HOPE might respond to, or a DMH outreach team?
Well, not all crises present a threat.
Correct.
To the people around them. So could you just describe how those situations are responded to by SMART teams?
Absolutely. First would happen to be is a field unit, a patrol unit in one of our 21 geographic divisions would come upon a circumstance when they find somebody who is suffering from mental illness, and they're required by our policy to contact our triage desk, which is a 24-hour operation. The SMART triage officer will take all that information in, and we'll see if there's a SMART team that is available to respond to that call. If a SMART team is available to respond, a SMART team, which consists of a Department of Mental Health clinician and a police officer, will then respond, determine the best place for that officer. If the officer wants to bring that subject to the station or stay at the residence or wherever they are, they will come and meet. Once the clinician and the officer from the SMART team engage with the officer, gather the information, they will take over that situation and will determine the best disposition for that person. The clinician will do a clinical assessment of that person, taking into account their medical history, their mental health history, maybe services they're already linked to, hospitals they're already linked to, and then we'll determine the best course of action for that person. The SMART team will then transport that person to the most appropriate care facility.
Thank you. And at the hearing, we learned about the Pasadena Police Department's program where mental health teams are first responders. Can you help us understand a little bit more about these teams, how they operate, how that's different than the LAPD and what efforts you may have taken to kind of explore those first responder approaches?
Absolutely. Not working for Pasadena or other agencies that act as a first responder, many times, and from what I've talked to, if there is a threat or could be a threat to their clinician, they will not engage until another unit is present. Uniformed officers would come in. It's the same way we operate here. If a SMART team is available and in the area, they will respond to that call. However, since we'll be with a psychologist or a mental health nurse, we're not going to put that person where there is any possibility of danger. If there is not and the officer determines it's safe to engage at that point, our SMART teams will engage as first responders. This most often happens actually in the downtown area when we have people who are threatening to jump from a bridge or an overpass. Oftentimes, our SMART teams are the first responders, and they will engage with that person and have been very successful in talking them, whether it's the officer or the clinician. It depends on whoever that person tends to gain an affinity for. They will be able to talk them back over the fence, or using LAFD will do that as well.
Okay, great.
Commissioner, the only thing I would add to that is that the city of Pasadena is about half the size of an LAPD division. So if they have a SMART team, then they're going to be close by and able to respond. We run 2 SMART teams per bureau.
That's correct, sir.
And so a bureau is probably 8 times the size of the city of Pasadena, maybe 10 times. So it's a little more difficult for us to be the first responder.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And also at the hearing, we heard several members of the public share stories about encounters between the police and those suffering from mental illness, which they felt were unnecessarily escalated by the officer. How can those situations be addressed? How are they handled when they do happen? And how does the department get feedback like this in order to continue to improve?
One of the things that the department has seen fit to do is to dispatch a supervisor with every call of a mental health crisis. That has been put into place, and if a supervisor is available, they will respond. That can help give command and control to have that supervisor step back and be able to de-escalate as they need to. So that's one of the things we've put into place to do that. What's the second part of your question, ma'am? Sorry.
Yeah, and how do you get feedback to make sure that you're continuing to improve?
The feedback is one of the things we do is we have the chief saw fit to give us 4 senior lead officers. Their primary job is to go out into the community and have mental health forums or mental health meetings. Year to date, we've done 54 of those meetings with 1,800 people attending those meetings, and it is primarily a feedback mechanism. It is nothing that we're presenting. It's more of a feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know how we can do better. The thing that we've noticed is that through our MHIT training, which starting in January of 2016, every new police officer, when they're 11 months into their field training, has gone through that. As a matter of fact, just yesterday on one of our social media pages, which we use, we have Twitter, we also have a Facebook account, and we have people talking to us. A father reached out to us and told us about his 17-year-old who had been hospitalized 12 times for cutting, and how he just had a response this week of 2 Foothill officers, and he said there was a definite difference, and one of those officers had been through our 40-hour school. So it is making a difference. And I think that we also had some of our DMH clinicians do a clinical study on police officers when they started day 1 of the training to day 4 of the training, and what their attitudinal differences was. And they did a verified clinical study and showed there was a shift from day 1 to day 4 on their attitudes of how they perceived, 1, threats of those with mental illness, and 2, the compassion and reduction in stigma. And we actually presented that up in a Forensic Mental Health Association in Monterey this year, and it's showing a marked improvement. So that's some of the tangibles we have.
That is great to hear. Thank you so much. And have you identified any areas for improvement or expansion in the trainings that you provide around mental illness, which I've participated in some and appreciate?
We're continually looking to look at ways to train. As a matter of fact, Chief Beck has made inroads with NAMI, and we're looking at actually doing a training. It's going to be an online training with folks from NAMI to get it to every officer to go through.
For people who may not know, can you explain what NAMI is?
Yeah, National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is the nation's largest advocacy group for those with mental illness. And it's primarily the folks we deal with are parents and family members of those suffering with mental illness. And so they've come alongside us, and we're going to try and do a training primarily for police officers to show them what resources, free resources, are available into the community, like the Family to Family, which is a training that NAMI gives for free for family members resource to learn how to deal with a person in their family who is dealing with mental illness. And so we're going to allow police officers to get those resources. So when they're engaging with a family member, they can say, do you know there's a group right here in the San Fernando Valley that you can engage with? There's a group right here in downtown LA you can engage with. So those are some of the things we're looking at, and we're continually finding new groups to help us. Autism Society of Los Angeles is one of them. And so we're learning continually as people come to us to find out better ways of training our police officers and getting more engaged with the community that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a quick, I'm interested in the forms that you made reference to. Is it possible for you to share a list of those 54 forms where they were held? You said that was in the last year?
That's actually just year to date.
Year to date? Okay, perfect. If you would just share
I do have a list of those, and I can provide them for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also, and I will leave it at this again, I know how hard, and to Commissioner Figueroa's point, want to acknowledge the incredible efforts of officers throughout this department to learn and to incorporate in their policing best practices as it relates to the diverse members of the community, in particular those members with mental illness, to incorporate those best practices into their contacts. I do believe, however, that we have to make sure that as a part of the feedback loop, and this is, it's always tough. We are always, it always feels like we give less time and attention and credit to those situations that go well. And a month ago, I witnessed a situation with a couple of our officers that went extremely well. They had no idea I was watching, and definitely reached out to acknowledge what they did. But it's incredibly important that we pay particular attention to where we have breakdowns, and that we are seeking feedback and have a mechanism for follow-up where things don't go well, so that we can, in fact, understand the complexities that create the escalations and the consequences associated with those escalations. And so I, again, want to just, focus our attention not from a perspective of being critical, but really from a perspective of leaning in further so that we, working with community partners, achieve our objectives. And so to that point, and I know that Commissioner Goldsmith made reference to the some of the testimony we heard at the particular hearing that she called for. I'm very interested in what we do when we get that kind of feedback. Do we look into those incidents? Do we follow up with the people reporting that feedback? How do we specifically engage in a way that they become opportunities to learn and improve? So, thank you for your report, and appreciate both your efforts, and Chief, certainly understand and appreciate the work that you've directed the department to do in these various areas.
Thank you.
I have more.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that, and want to just build on that. That as a society, I think we should judge ourselves by how we treat the most vulnerable among us, and really deeply appreciate the department's extra attention and focus on people experiencing mental illness as well as people experiencing homelessness, and putting additional resources and support into addressing those issues, and always focused on continuous improvement. It's deeply appreciated. And I do have a couple other questions. One is, what are the use of force statistics department-wide for people with a mental illness or experiencing a mental health crisis? And is it concentrated in certain divisions? And what would you attribute those differences to?
I don't have division by division, and as far as use of force goes, from the cases that are reported to the mental evaluation unit, out of all the contacts and of 2016, 2.7% resulted in a reportable use of force, and that was out of 18,000 calls for service or interactions with those with mental illness. Only 2.7 of those dealt with any mental illness. I mean, we dealt with use of force at all. As far as divisions, I don't have the stats on which divisions lead in that for use of force,
Okay.
but I could
That'd be great.
look into that.
Thank you. And how do those numbers compare to the general population? The 2.7%.
That actually, I don't have that would be something for the department.
1.9 versus 2.7.
So I didn't hear anything except what you. Okay, got it. And has that changed over time? Do you know? And do you know?
It's
why that would be
remained
changing?
pretty consistent as
Okay.
far, and I've only been in this position for 2 years, but as far as I can tell from the statistics we have, it's remained consistent about that level.
Okay, thank you.
Having been tracking over a long period of time, the department has accelerated its awareness and tracking this as the
Microphone.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have any comment on this item?
8 comment cards. The first 4, Pastor Q. Jan Marie, Ashley Richardson Hall, Hamid Khan, and Robert Sanchez.
Good morning, Pastor Q. Jamawi, Church Without Walls, Skid Row. How can law enforcement serve both groups of people in the city of Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles specifically, as it relates to those who live in the lofts and Skid Row, with compassion when the loft dwellers are calling to deal with homelessness? How do you enforce laws but at the same time have compassion? And I ask that because compassion is a complex thing. It says, when before Jesus healed a man, he was moved with compassion. Whatever moves you, that's what you're going to lead with, right? As it relates to the SMART team, the officer said, if the SMART team is available, and we know that well because Carlos O'Connor was killed because the SMART team was not available when he was tased off the billboard. About a year ago, the Skid Row community declared a state of emergency. LASHA came out with their report. Homelessness has risen 20%. We could have told y'all that. And as you can tell by the LGBTQ statistics, black folks are the top of every bad statistic. This is the context by which I always come up here. There's always pain in my voice because we make the list of every bad statistic. For instance, black folks are 9% of the population of the city of Los Angeles, 40% of homelessness. So essentially, when you're dealing with Skid Row, you're dealing with a black community, predominantly, not exclusively, right? How do you think black folks feel when they're mentally ill and they see a police officer, given the history? Again, I heard the officer say last week, this is not only about Skid Row. We know that, but Skid Row is a microcosm of the whole city of Los Angeles. And remember, it was said earlier that Reagan threw everyone on the streets, all the mentally ill people. So I say this. When Reagan threw everyone on the street, that made the state the primary predator and not drug dealers. They're the secondary predators. So we need to deal with the primary issue, and then we'll deal with the second.
Ashley Richardson Hill, Hamid Khan,
I think that's the secondary trauma that we all face coming in here, that we just sit here. Yeah, absolutely. I think much has been said already, and when we talk about call for service, we saw what happened with, as Pastor Q spoke about, Carlos Ocanio, and then, of course, Charlie Africa. The whole world witnessed that. But at least being in in Skid Row community for several years now, it's a routine. You witness that on a daily basis. It's not something that you read in the newspaper. You see that how, and I want to go back to the previous comment about ideology, that how the communities are pathologized, how their criminality is predetermined, how their humanity is predetermined as well. So anytime a call for service is made, the intent to serve the community is guided and driven by that pathology as well. Like, how would we fulfill the needs? And if the needs are fulfilled by training of shooting and using force, what we're going to have, a lethal combination and death. What we're going to have, trauma, what we're going to have, dehumanization, and really degrading and humiliating a body, a human life. So that's what's been going on. What happened at the hearings, I mean, we didn't hear anything at all, because one of the things that was raised in the hearings was that we are looking for community-based solutions. And yes, Chamberlain earlier spoke about something that LA Can had offered, but community-based solutions are not just based upon one demand. Community-based solutions are actively when the community is in control of the solution. It is when the community is driving those solutions. It is when the community is actively participating in those solutions. But what we are seeing is that now again, I mean, I could see that, like, where this thing is leading, because we spoke about Pasadena. And let's not give Pasadena a pass, because Pasadena Police Department kills people as well. But what I saw was this whole thing about we don't have the capacity. What I heard was we don't have enough funding. We don't have enough manpower. But ultimately, it comes down to community-based solutions, so we didn't hear anything at all.
Robert Sanchez, followed by Ted Hayes, Patty Beers, Eddie H., and Steve Diaz. Robert Sanchez, not present. Mr. Hayes?
I'm sorry, is it Robert Sanchez or Robert Suker?
Oh, I'm sorry, Suker.
Thank you.
That looks like Sanchez.
Hi. It's been a while since I've been here, maybe 3 months or 4 months. I don't know if you recognize me, but I recognize most of you. My name is Robert Suker, and I'm a former teacher with the Los Angeles Unified School District and a member of White People for Black Lives. And I have to say, having been away for 3 months and coming back, I am really seeing a kind of different set of vocabulary, like happening here, that is impressive to me. I have to say that. I see, now, again, this is just words that are being talked about, but it's a different vocabulary that we were seeing when I was here a year before, when a lot of it was about enforcement and intervention.
They've co-opted our language.
That's fine, but it's still happening. It's in this room. We're talking about building trust, bias training, de-escalation, mental health intervention, trauma enforced training. All of these issues, and I'm speaking to you now as a retired teacher of 27 years experience. This is a public institution, first of all. And by the way, I'll just do a little
Supposed to be.
Hold on. Let me just try to speak for a few minutes, 46 seconds. I think this place needs to have Wi-Fi provided for the people who are here, who we can access the same kind of intelligent sources that you're getting. I think it's a public institution. We deserve that. But what I want to say is that as a teacher, I was struggling in the trenches to try to access these kind of services that you're talking about for my students. I work with adult immigrants for the most part. There is a paucity of services. Why? Because the funding is cut for those services. However, your funding is not cut. Your funding is going to continue to increase. But what gives me a modicum of hope is the idea that you are talking about these issues and that you are going to collect more data, more information about how you can collaborate with these people in the community on the ground who want to provide these services. Because mental health, my cousin was kicked to death in Skid Row. My brother hung himself because he didn't get the mental health services he needed. So this is a war that's ongoing, but I'm feeling hopeful that there's going to be more of this kind of collaboration happening. Thank you.
Ted Hayes, please.
Mr. Hayes?
This is a term you may not be familiar with because it hasn't been utilized too much in this generation. It's called boondoggle. LA Unified School District went through that when they overbuilt schools because they said the population of kids are going to explode because of illegal aliens. Well, they overbuilt, and it took a lot of tax money to do it. And that's what this is going to be. We know that it's not simply that homeless people are resistant. They're absolutely opposed to getting off the street and following rules, following decorum, and doing those things. Not only that, we know very well, as some people have said, it requires psychologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists. We don't have that many people to deal with 43,000 people, do we? So it's a joke. It'll never happen. The only thing that will happen is that they will spend money to build housing that no one will ever occupy. And so the developers, that's a beautiful name, isn't it? Developers will make a fortune building housing that no one will occupy. So I was on the LA Homeless Services Authority for 3 years, and I really found out a lot about homelessness and homeless people. I decided I would stay on Skid Row for 30 days in a tent. Found out I would either be killed or I would have to kill someone. And we heard about statistics of people getting killed on Skid Row. But it's just beyond belief. But anyway, all this money that they are taking from the taxpayers is a joke. It will never be reality, never become a reality to eliminate homelessness.
Patty Beers.
Good morning. I'm here to speak as a mom. In 1998, my son was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, and then a whole bunch of other alphabetical letters. And then he was diagnosed with high-functioning autism. And one of the things that the psychiatrist told me, and he made sure to take this seriously, is that if my son was having a mental health emergency, and he had many, never, ever call the police. I don't understand. The police has half of the budget. Why are you keep taking everyone's jobs? You keep taking everyone's money. This is not your expertise. You're not experts on homelessness. You're not experts on youth programs. You're not experts on homelessness. This is not your job. You shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't have half of the money from the city that could be going to the people who really know how to do these things. I had so much to say, it's hard to remember. My mom was 5 feet tall. She weighed 300 pounds. She worked at Camarillo State Hospital before Reagan threw everyone out. This little short, fat woman could handle a person having a mental health emergency. If she could handle it, how come cops can't handle it? How come there's such a high percentage of mentally ill people being killed by cops? Maybe it's because it's not your job. That's not what you should be doing.
Thank you. Eddie H.
Leg went to sleep. Eddie H., Los Angeles Community Action Network. I've been sitting here trying to wrap my mind around these reports and trying to extrapolate from these reports some form of rationality, as I often do when I hear reports coming from the LAPD. Oftentimes they're very weak in nature, has no substance, and are full of things that are not relevant. You know, we talk about you guys as being first responders, you guys being the care or to solve all when it comes to mental illness. But I was sitting there just thinking and wondering, why would you guys want to be involved in this in the first place? And a very simplistic answer came to me, because you guys want to be involved in everything. We live in a state of perpetual terrorism, and you are the terrorists. We live in a police state, and that's what you guys do. You want to police everybody's everything, our bodies, minds, souls, and spirits. That's why you want to be involved. You do not have the expertise, and you're talking to someone who's worked in this field for many years. And not just that, my younger brother suffers from a mental illness. So I know what it takes to be able to do this job in an adequate fashion. It takes training much more than 40 hours. It takes continuous training. As I managed a couple of facilities, I got continuous training from state agencies, but I also pass that training on to my employees. So I know what it takes. We just come here, and I've heard L.A. Can be referenced a couple of times, and I just want to say, don't patronize us to appease us when you really don't care what we do and how we do it. Because if you did, you would have made a phone call to us a long time ago to ask us what your thoughts is on concerning homelessness. We work on the ground on a daily basis, and homeless people are not out there killing people randomly every day, as someone has said. And also, people with mental illnesses are not all violent individuals, as someone else said.
Next speaker, please.
Steve Diaz, please.
Mr. Diaz.
He gets off as a child. This is the epitome of white privilege and white entitlement.
Mr. Diaz. Is he here?
Last speaker on this item.
Mr. Diaz? You going to speak, sir?
We're leading the conversation because we're there on a day-to-day basis. We don't come here because it feels good to come here each and every week and listen and watch you guys just turn your head when we talk. We come here because we fight for the good. Someone once said that a fight for justice is a just fight. And we would not stop fighting. We would be undaunted, unwavering, and vigilant in the fight that we're going to create each and every week.
Sir, thank you for your comments. Can we move on to the next speaker, please?
I don't want to move. Ask Del Ford, can he move?
Sir, I'm going to give you one more warning. Can you please have a seat so we can continue with the meeting?
The list goes on and on and on. Can they move on? They can't. It's 6 weeks.
Sir, now I'm asking you to leave.
There because of these police officers.
Sir, I'm asking you to leave the meeting. Please leave the meeting. Sir, it's your last warning. If you do not leave, then we're going to be forced to shut the meeting down. Okay, we're going to take a recess. We're going to have to clear the room.
Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter now. Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here.
Okay, great. Okay,
you need action on item 2F.
2F, okay.
Was it 2D?
2D.
2D, I'm sorry.
You have a motion to approve item 2D?
Actually, I have a report back to that.
Okay. On this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the department to conduct a detailed comparison and critical analysis on mental health first responder models and determine whether there's anything the department can learn or improve upon its own responses. That's it.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve item 2D?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
We're now on item number 3, report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Good morning, Commissioners. I think it's still morning. Thank you. A couple of things to report on, and I'll be very quick. 10 shootings occurred in the city of Los Angeles over the past weekend. 4 in Operations South Bureau, 3 in Operations Central Bureau, 2 in Operations Valley Bureau, 1 in Operations West Bureau. 2 of them resulted in the death of the individual that was shot. One of those, actually both of those were in Central Bureau. We had 2 officer-involved shootings since you last met. One occurred this Tuesday past at about 2100 hours in Harbor area. Uniformed patrol officers responded to a man with a gun radio call. When officers arrived and were checking the area, they were directed by witnesses to a potential suspect, who the witnesses later described as being armed. He was identified as Eric Rivera, walking southbound on the west sidewalk of Wilmington Boulevard. Officers drove their vehicle towards him. As they did, Rivera turned toward them and produced what officers believed to be a handgun in his hand. Officers immediately exited their vehicle, and an officer-involved shooting occurred. Officers exited their vehicle in such haste that it was not placed in park. Mr. Rivera was struck by police gunfire, fell to the ground, and was hit by the rolling forward of the police vehicle. He died at scene, likely as a result of the gunshot wounds. A plastic toy handgun was recovered at scene. One of the officers sustained an arm injury, probably because of the action of the vehicle, but we are not sure at this point. Obviously, the investigation continues. Hopefully, much more detail will become apparent as that goes forward. On June 8th, at about 3:15 in the afternoon, Hollenbeck area uniformed patrol police officers initiated a stop with a known 18th Street gang member who had been previously arrested for possession of a handgun, previously as in just a week prior. The officers observed a bulge under his shorts in the area that a handgun could be secreted. The individual was identified as Pedro Echeverria. Officers attempted to verbally get verbal compliance. They were not successful. A physical altercation began. One of the officers observed Echeverria to be holding a handgun in his left hand during the physical altercation. The officers communicated that, disengaged as they would from their training with Echeverria. Echeverria began to run, turned towards the officers, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. He was struck and taken into custody without further incident. He currently is surviving his wounds, and a 9mm handgun was recovered at scene. No officer significantly injured as a result of this incident. Crime stats were at about a 1% increase in violent crime in the city of Los Angeles, about a 1.2 increase in property crime in the city of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, at this point in the year, we're up 9 homicides as compared to last year. That's just below an 8% increase. Incidents of shots fired are down slightly. Numbers of victims shot are up about 5.1%. Gang crime is down 8%. Gang homicides are about even at this point. Guns recovered is part of the one of the mayor's areas of concentration, as well as my own. We're at 2,696 guns recovered. That's exclusive, or not including the gun buyback. That's an 8.5% increase over last year, and a 25% increase over the 5-year average. Traffic collisions, another area of mayoral focus, as well as my own. We're up about 2.2% in total over last year. And fatalities, we are up 1 over last year, which is a 1% increase. We are As of the 3rd of this month, we were at 99 fatalities year to date versus 100 last year. Driving under the influence accidents are down in total about 7%, and fatalities attributed to driving under the influence are down significantly, about 33%. Hit and runs are about even compared to last year. Serious hit and runs, those involving injury or death, are up significantly, about 40%. Motor vehicle versus pedestrians are up about 1%, but serious motor vehicle versus pedestrian incidents where somebody is injured or killed are up 11%, and those where someone is killed are up 27.9% as compared to last year. That's a total of 55 versus 43. So obviously, saying all the traffic is to say this is that we need to concentrate on motor vehicle versus pedestrian accidents, and we're working with the Department of Transportation to do that, not only through enforcement and education, but also through engineering. Personnel statistics, we're at 9,956, about 300 civilians, 3,000 civilians, 300 reserves, and 7,000 cadets have been in the program. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
No.
Do we have any comment on this item?
We have 2 comment cards. We have Patty Beers and Ted Hayes.
So I'm back again today as a mother. I don't understand why when a mother or son is being shot, why do they keep her away? Well, I know why. We all know why. If you don't let a mother go in the hospital and have her right to hold her son's hand, it's obvious. You're trying to cover something up, and you look like criminals. When you shoot somebody, and then you don't let his mother come in the hospital. Hundreds of people spent the whole day for 2 days calling and demanding that Pedro Echeverria's mother, Pedro was shot 4 times by LAPD. And hundreds of people are calling just to ask for a mother to have her right to hold her son's hand in the hospital, like every mother would do. What happened to that family liaison team? What happened to that trying to at least give off an appearance of being honest and compassionate or transparent, or what even happened to trying to keep up that facade because it's gone? I'm disgusted. How do you kill somebody? How do you shoot somebody? Well, he's still alive, thank God. Hopefully he'll stay that way. But the witness whose video we all had to back up because we know those things disappear. The witness said once he was on the ground, there was no reason to keep shooting him. What's with that? What are you trying to hide? You don't need to be shooting people. You're disgusting.
I happened to be in this building about 8 o'clock p.m. at night. I saw a steady stream of officers coming in. I counted 10, then 15. I got up to 35 officers coming in here. I said, who's out there patrolling? Okay. So I think it's important, Chief, that we understand what the deployment is on every shift. How many black and whites are out there on various shifts? Some shifts require more because I guess the crime activity is higher or whatever. You could determine that. But I say that because there have been some scandals about deployment. One was that we found out way back that deployment was based upon property values, not on crime areas. So I doubt whether that's the situation today, because Skid Row at least has a heavy deployment of officers for obvious reasons. But when I see 35 officers coming to this facility at 8 o'clock at night. What are they doing here? What's their business here? I don't know. I'm not curious about that, but I am curious about the deployment. How many black and whites are out there? Now, the most effective tool that the LAPD has is the eye in the sky. Now, does that copter take off from Piper Tech, or are they constantly on patrol? That's something I think is important, because they have a limited time they can fly, and it's very expensive to fly them, and I guess we're concerned about the expense of doing anything. So the eye in the sky is the most effective tool we've got, but the people who are being chased by that copter simply don't realize they cannot evade that copter. And I think we should point that out, that the copter is an effective tool and you cannot outrun it.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. We're now on item number 4, public comment period. We have 8 comment cards. We have Victoria Hari, Patty Beers, Prentice Jenkins,
Prentice Jenkins, Peace Between Residents and Police. I continue to come in every week, support the board, President Johnson, Vice President Soboroff, Chief. Peace Between Residents and Police will not get off the ground without your support. Remember, I'm the only one continuing to say I want peace between the residents and police. When I say I'm going to achieve peace between residents and police, I'll do it. I said I was going to open a free computer training program. That was it. And it was free for the entire community. I said I was going to open a free food bank program. That's me at the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, picking it up, putting it in the truck, taking it back to the office and passing it out. When I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. But my job is to do the heavy lifting. Your job is to find the financing for it. I mean, you know why? There's the police want $4,000 for a canine leash. If you need $4,000 for a canine leash, and you say you want peace between residents and police, if you don't do anything financially for it, then you don't actually want peace. There's only one person in here continuing to talk about peace. Everybody else is cussing at you. Am I right? There are people coming in here cursing at you. And I'm the only one that continues to talk about peace between residents and police. But talk is cheap. I'm from Missouri. Show me state. I'll do the heavy lifting. The board has to find the financing for it. Someone find the financing for peace between residents and police, and I'll do all the heavy lifting. But that's if you really want peace between residents and police, and I really want peace between residents and police, because the police aren't going anywhere. No matter what anybody says, the police aren't going anywhere.
Thank you.
Christine Gatson, Michelle Dumont, Ted Hayes. Mr. Hayes? Public comment? General public.
When I was here at 8 o'clock, it's because there was an officer who would not allow me to use the restroom. Okay? And so I asked him why. He said, because the restroom was being painted. Oh, really? It's a tile restroom. You don't paint tile. But anyway, he was insistent on not allowing me to use the restroom. So I called Central Division. I spoke to a sergeant there, and I was standing here for half an hour. I also went to Central Division, walked over there, and explained that they had decapitated a Native American, what I call First American, and put his head on the jersey. Now, I don't know whether the LAPD keeps up with the major complaints and incidents with race and ethnicity, but the Native Americans have been complaining about they're being put on athletic jerseys forever. Now, I spoke to an officer who was involved in making that display, and I mentioned to him that when they find out you've got this head on your jersey, he said, bring him on. Okay. So I don't understand that. Now, that officer's never going to get a day off, but had it been a LA Times article, believe me, they love that kind of thing. Had it been an LAPD article about the LAPD is decapitating the first Americans and putting their names on their jersey, despite all the turmoil going on around that issue. So I would suggest that before we put anything up, there be someone in command who approves of it. Not just a committee of officers who are going to be involved in the athletic event, but someone who has the foresight to recognize some things you might do may not be politically correct.
The next card is for DA and Kai Utsumi, and we have no other cards on this item. We're now on item number 5. We do have one comment card on 5A2. We have Ted Hayes.
The media has seen that, to the best of my hearing, to report 2 dog shootings by the LAPD. And explain why it happened, and it was really understandable on my part that some guy wanted to go beyond the yellow tape, and he had his dog with him. So you don't mess with the dog's master. And one other thing is, for some reason, animals, dogs particularly, dislike people who wear uniforms. That's any postal worker. You wear a uniform, dogs dislike you immediately. Anyway, in the 2 instances that the TV media reported the shootings were when going beyond the yellow tape was what both these dog owners had done. And I am convinced that as time goes on, if these numbers increase, you'll be hearing from pet owners and agencies that deal with animals. Everybody downtown has a dog. And I don't know why a guy would go beyond the yellow tape and take his dog with him unless he believed that dog could protect him. And the dog really tried to protect his master and got shot in the activity. So maybe there should be some kind of training. I don't know what it could possibly be. I can't make a recommendation about how you handle a person who has a dog, because the dog is going to get involved in that situation if it becomes one where hands are placed upon his master and so forth and so on. So maybe there should be some sort of training in that area of how you deal with people who have a pet.
There are no other comment cards. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A1 and 2 in accordance with Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. The Executive Director will report out.
The actions of the Commission on item 5A1, OIS 038-16, as to tactics, administrative disapproval, both officers, vote of 4-1, drawing and exhibiting, in policy, both officers, 5-0, deadly use of force, out of policy, 1 police officer, 3, vote 4-1. As to OIS Animal 056-16, Chief's recommendation is adopted unanimously as presented.
Is there a motion to adjourn, Mr. President?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Under 2 minutes, Mr. T. We
Hi, I'm Gina Ray, and this is my dog Whippet. We're from Winnetka. Get it, girl. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35. This is our city and our channel.